Due Process, winner of 18 regional Emmy Awards, including the 2010 New York Emmy for our coverage of voting rights and the 2010 Mid-Atlantic Emmy for Best Discussion Series.
Thank you. You may be seated. Good morning.
A New Jersey judge may get tenure, but it's only good till age 70. Then it's off the bench. That provision imposed in 1947. But is 70 today what it was 60 years ago? Mandatory retirement for judges. Up next on Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process provided by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law, and by the Fund for New Jersey, supporting informed citizens for an effective democracy.
Oliver Wendell Holmes served the nation's high court till age 90. So did Justice John Paul Stevens, who retired just last year. Then why is it that our state Supreme Court justices, in fact, all of our New Jersey judges, hang up their robes, ready or not, at age 70? We'll hear from two of them, two former Chief Justices, on whether it still makes sense. I'm Raymond Brown.
And I'm Sandra King. And the reason it's an issue here is the feds have one set of rules for their jurists, while the states make their own. This state's judicial retirement rule goes back nearly 64 years. And the specter of scenes like this one from The West Wing was most likely the reason why.
Jungle out there.
I have to do this site before class.
An old West Wing plot.
Finish my con law reading.
An aged Chief Justice.
I'm sorry, sir. I don't...
Losing his grip. Losing his mind.
They're ready, Mr. Chief Justice.
But with claim to a seat he can hold for life. Something that could happen surely has happened, whether on the High Court or some other U.S. bench, because federal judges can sit indefinitely, irrespective of age.
A lifetime appointment. He's still alive, so he gets to decide when it's time.
A far cry from our own state system, where even a judge who's still in his prime, on the court or in court, is forced to retire at age 70.
Your presence here tonight and the attendance by all of you makes me feel really proud and privileged to have served.
The retirement dinner for Judge Claude Coleman was a tribute.
Thank you very much.
But it was also occasion for colleagues and friends to note the irony of his departure.
Is alive and vibrant and still capable of delivering justice to the citizens of New Jersey. Why should he be compelled to retire at age 70?
Having someone mandatorily retire simply because they've reached the age of 70 is just I don't think it reflects current realities.
In every other walk of life, people can continue in their occupations in an effective way. In fact, I think after the age of 70, sometimes people bring even greater wisdom to the judiciary.
I look well, I'm healthy, I'm lucky in that respect. But not all of us who are 70 are doing well, and sometimes we don't know it. We're starting to lose our hearing, our memory starts to slip, and these things start to happen to us. But we're not ready to admit it because we want to keep working.
Some judges, maybe at 70 they're ready to go, but we're losing some really great judges, and we have a shortage. I mean, look at Judge Coleman. He's still in his prime.
And because of that shortage, Claude Coleman now is back on the bench.
What is allowed to consider the preference of the child.
This time in Hudson instead of Essex, due to a loophole known as recall.
I came back on recall. Yeah, I did come back on recall.
Because despite the forced retirement at 70, a judge can be brought back part-time to sit where the shortage exists.
The visitors that wanted me to come back on recall, they're missing a lot of judges, and right now, whatever the political landscape is, they're not appointing a lot of judges to fulfill those vacancies because we're doing bad down there.
But for another Coleman, no relation, who made history as the first black justice on New Jersey's Supreme Court, there was no judicial second act, the result of having sat on too lofty a bench.
I obviously elected, as most of the retired justices do, not to serve on recall after your tenure on the court has ended.
Justice Coleman, too, forced out for age.
Busy is a one-word description.
Now, nearly 8 years later, he's practicing law, sitting on the Rutgers Board of Governors and several other major boards and committees. He, too, still playing a mean game of tennis.
Just in case Judge Claude and Sandy have enough energy left after these ceremonies, I'm going to challenge them to a game of tennis.
And he was there to see Judge Claude Coleman leave the bench.
Your work as a jurist is representative of what an American with honor, integrity, and intelligence can achieve.
All rise. Honorable Claude Coleman presiding.
Without birthright of social and economic privilege.
But only in New Jersey until the age of 70, when the judicial chariot turns into a pumpkin, a rule that goes back more than 60 years.
You'd like to see that law changed?
Yes, absolutely.
To 75?
Yes, to 75 or any other reasonable age that the legislature may agree upon.
People are living longer and they are healthier than they were previously. And I think it's important, too, that we extend the retirement age. But I think there should be something to be sure that the person who is going to stay on after they're age 70 is capable of doing so.
So there is a move to change New Jersey's rule of 70 and out.
Well, I think 70 is the new 60.
I can walk.
Maybe not to the federal standard.
I'll let him know you're here, sir.
Of appointment for a lifetime.
Mr. Chief Justice.
But a bill is pending that would raise judicial retirement to what some would call a more appropriate 21st century age for forcing New Jersey judges off the court.
So should we follow the feds and let our judges remain until they decide they're ready to go? Or should we stay with the safer course and show jurists the door as we wish them a happy 70th birthday?
Two who know just how that feels, two who didn't go out to pasture when they went off the bench, are New Jersey's two former Chief Justices. Deborah Poritz was Chief Justice for 10 years until October 2006 when she turned 70. James Zazzali was named the state's next chief, but he held the post for just 8 months, just until he turned 70 as well. Welcome to both of you.
Let me start by asking you, Chief Justice Poritz. We heard Angelo Genova say that 70 is the new 60. Is that an overstatement, or in fact, who we were in 1947 and who we are in 2011 in terms of how we age? Is that different enough to justify a change?
I think it is. When the framers of our Constitution met in 1947, they thought of lifetime tenure as up to age 70. I don't think we think that way anymore. Our life expectancies have been extended through modern medicine, through the lives we live, and I think we have a very different view of what people can do in their 60s, in their 70s, even their 80s.
Justice Zazzali, before I ask you your point of view on this subject, I want to ask you first, has your point of view changed from the time when you were 45 until today about what should be the mandatory retirement age, if any?
Somewhat so. I think a few years ago, I was tilting in favor of keeping it exactly as is, maintaining the status quo. And now I'm leaning in the other direction. It's sort of reminiscent, and I know Chief Justice Poritz is familiar with this, anecdote that Justice Brennan, who was one of the founding fathers back in 1947, one of the draftspersons of the Constitution, he was in favor of the 70-year retirement age. And then when he turned 73, he says, now I have reservations about that. So I have some reservations, but I think it's a bit of a closer question than one would think. It's a difficult one, and that's why this discussion is healthy. Although in terms of Angelo Genova saying that 70 is the new 60, after listening to me for this half hour, people may conclude that 70 is the new 90.
Chief Zazzali, when you were thinking, let's leave things just as they were, as they are, was that because you thought that, in fact, 70 was an age when people started to not be as effective, or was it the new blood question?
I think it's a combination of factors. I'm largely influenced by the debate before the Judicial College 6 or 7 years ago when Chief Justice Poritz was presiding, and she organized a discussion-debate with Governor Kane and Governor Byrne. And it was very interesting. Governor Kane, the non-lawyer, non-judge, arguing in favor of increasing the age. Governor Byrne, former judge and attorney, maintained that we should keep the status quo. I'm not sure if those positions are the same for both of those gentlemen. I suspect they are. But what are the factors that would lead one to argue, I'm not saying it's the right result, that we should keep it at age 70? I think one of the major reasons is to give younger men and women a chance, an opportunity. And coincident with that would be to give the judiciary a sense of renewal and reinvigoration. That's at least an argument or a consideration that goes into the debate. The other is that talking about the age problem, there's no question, maybe it's not every year that we deteriorate, but certainly every 5 or 10 years, there is a difference in so many of us in our mental and physical abilities. So I think that has contributed to the discussion.
Picking up on
these are valid factors, but again, I'm leaning towards an increase.
Chief, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I think that there's a loss as well. And I think it's a question, as Chief Justice Zazzali is saying, of balancing these factors. And the loss is a loss, I won't speak for myself, I'll say Chief Justice Zazzali, it's a loss in wisdom. It's a loss in what someone who's been on the court, a trial judge who's had experience in the trial courts, it's a learning experience, and each year brings with it new problems, new issues, and the judge grows into the job and then has so much to give back. And so there's a loss when you say to people who have been doing this and who've been learning and who've been using that which they've learned in their positions, you say to them, it's time for you to go now. I think you have to balance young people, new ideas, with the wisdom of experience and that comes both with age and with years on the position.
We actually have two issues in the air at the same time. One is the question of whether a person's individual capacity may diminish over time, and the other is this concept of balancing the sagacity of age against giving new opportunities. Is it possible that we might have a different or contemplate a different rule for a Supreme Court in a state where you have a limited number of positions available from the general judiciary, trial judges, where there are a larger number? That is, if you have 7 justices on the Supreme Court and they're all healthy and live for a very long time, you could have, at least collectively, a group of people that sort of ossify together. Not that that would ever happen here, but it might happen elsewhere. As opposed to the trial court, where judges staying on probably isn't such a limitation on young people moving up.
I don't think there's any difference in terms of learning and wisdom gained in the position, in the job. That is, a Supreme Court justice learns just the way a trial court judge learns, no matter the experience that occurred before. I also think that, and I've said this a number of times, for many people, being on an appellate court is a life-changing experience. It's when you deal with difficult issues with colleagues together, working through these issues, I think that it's something changes and people grow and learn, and for most people, and I think that's a wisdom we lose. Again, it's a balance. I think it's true for the appellate court, whether it's a 7-person court or a 9-person court or even a 3-person court. There are some 5-person courts, I think, 3 in the appellate division. I think it's important to give people an opportunity to use that wisdom at the same time to say, we do need new blood, and so where is that line? I think that's the question we have to ask.
You know, one of the things that Claude Coleman said to me upon his retirement, and he certainly felt that he could have continued, and in fact is continuing on recall, is that perhaps there ought to, however, be medical and mental checks on jurists who, perhaps even before age 70. Where do you come down on that?
I worry about that. I would not recommend it, and this is my concern. I think it's very difficult to decide how you're going to do this. Are you going to have a series of memory tests that you will administer when a judge is 60 and then see at 70 whether that judge has deteriorated? Are you going to give...
That would be a bad idea.
It's not even a question of whether it's bad, it's a question of whether it's a workable system. I don't think it's a workable system. I don't see how you develop a methodology for determining who can continue to serve and who cannot. And do you do it every year after age 70? Do you decide every year someone has to go through a battery of tests or sit before a board and be questioned? I think we can rely on the system, and I won't even get into whether that might become politicized or not. Let's put that aside. I think if you have a system that sets a date, a reasonable date, perhaps it should be 75, perhaps it should be 80, that you have to rely, and this has happened with the United States Supreme Court, on colleagues and friends and others to say there's an informal system. There's a point at which we have to say to the judge, it's really time to leave if that occurs before the cutoff date.
But you know, the example of the West Wing that we showed was someone who clearly was not fit at that point to serve, but was not going to be influenced to leave the bench, at least until he knew who would be replacing him and whether that person would fill the role that he felt he was filling.
That's one of the advantages of actually having a cutoff date, because you take out of the process, unless someone is retiring early and can decide within that range, but you take out of the process if the person stays to age 70, age 75, the calculation of who is in office and who will appoint my successor.
Justice Zazzali, we often talk about the fact that courts...
I'm still here, by the way.
Oh, yes, I said. I was just going to direct a question to you.
Ray, you should know that in waiting, I've aged another year.
That's true. But you've gotten wiser along the way, so better for us to give you the next question.
I'm kidding.
Which is, courts
By the way, stay with the Chief. She's right, I think, on this question of
Have you ever known it to be wrong?
test.
Have you ever known it to be wrong?
Well, we talked about that in conference privately at times. But I think there is some considerable merit to not imposing tests. Certainly, there should be nothing formal. I think the way, but it does concern me that people will be slipping through that should not be there. But the answer is, as Chief Justice Poritz indicated, informal controls, whether it's colleagues, the assignment judge who knows his judges very well, et cetera, et cetera.
The conversation thus far has reflected very much sort of inside ball, what people people who might know a judge or a justice feel, especially in this informal process. But to the extent that courts in a democracy derive their functionality from legitimacy and public perception, do you think the public wants, in a general sense, to feel that its judges are older or wiser? Or if we had a court full of young persons, would that seem less legitimate to the public? Do you think people make certain assumptions about wisdom being gained with age?
I think both sides of that equation are correct. My problem is, though, and I realize that if the constitutional amendment goes before the public for approval, it should be and it will be debated. I just hope that debate is about issues like you've just described. I am terribly concerned that with the hostility towards the judiciary throughout the nation, in the public square, if you will, that this debate could be a very uninformed one, and that's putting a gentle touch on it.
What's the source of that hostility? Where do you think that comes from? Why
I think it's the events of the past few years, which are largely misinformed reactions on the part of the public, now arguing in so many areas for elected judges, which is about the worst possibility or the worst result we could have. I know that's not this program's theme today, but New Jersey wisely has eschewed elected judges, and that's one of the reasons this judiciary achieved such a tremendous reputation over the years. But there's such an anti-establishment feeling out there among the public that I am concerned that this debate could be politicized.
And in what kinds of things would you expect to creep into the argument if it wasn't an argument truly about the merits of age and age cutoffs as a guard against people being either ossified in position or incapable of carrying them out?
I think the public would get on this track or tack of activist judges, which is the wrong debate and the wrong issue. That's the sort of thing that would be that would pervade, not pervade, but that would affect the debate. And these are just not valid considerations. The valid considerations are the pros and cons that we've talked about. The pros of increasing the age are, by the way, the trend. It's going on elsewhere. The fact we talked about recall judges before. We did not note the fact that recall judges can serve until 80. Now, if they can serve until 80, it follows with almost greater force that why not have permanent judges be able to continue until 75? And then there's the argument of the Ronald Reagans and the John McCains. McCain running for office at 72, Reagan running at 69. Effective arguments, but they have their flaws too. We look at the recent biographies about Reagan, including the one just a month ago by his own son, talking about the early Alzheimer's that had set in early on in his first term.
But then we look at somebody like Justice Stevens, whom, as far as we know, was still in fine possession of his mind and his talents, and that was at age 90. So should we, as we think in New Jersey about whether or not to make a change, should we look to the feds and lifetime appointments?
That's a consideration, but I don't think it's determinative. I think this debate can be conducted in New Jersey on its own merits. By the way, staying with the federal issue, it's interesting that in the past year or two, the public has now started to, I'll use my word again, tilt against lifetime tenure for judges. At least that's what some of the polls are showing. So let's call the New Jersey shot. Let's make the New Jersey decision based on the circumstances that are extant here.
Let me ask you each to indulge the assumption that tomorrow there's a constitutional convention and you're both delegates. Where would each of you come down on this issue? Should there be a 7-year period after which is reappointment? And if there's a limitation on tenure, what should it be, if any?
I would go with a limitation on tenure, that is the period a judge serves, but I would raise the age.
Would there still be the 7-year preliminary period in your view?
I would not have this. I would adopt the federal system on initial appointment. That would mean tenure.
Justice Zazzali, do you agree with Chief Justice Poritz or not?
On this day, I do.
What about other days? We'll bring you back tomorrow. There'll be a different result.
No, but it may have been a different result a year ago.
Okay. And what do you expect? Let me just ask you with 30 seconds left, each of you. Will we see this change in age? We're talking about it, but is it going to happen?
I think there's a real possibility with legislation that's been introduced. It could happen, but I don't think it's likely to happen tomorrow.
Chief Zazzali?
3-4 years ago, I would have said it would have passed easily. I'm not so sure anymore. I think it would be a close vote. By the way, I should tell you that just before going on this program today, asking my colleagues the question, I approached it this way, and it was totally innocent. I said, I have to talk about whether the drinking age for judges should be increased.
Okay, we have to leave it there with our sincere thanks to Chief Justice Deborah Poritz and Chief Justice James Zazzali.
But we're back here every week with issues of law and justice. In the meantime, we hope you'll follow us on our Facebook page, Due Process Law and Justice, and contact us at dueprocesstv@gmail.com. For Sandy and all of us here at Due Process, thanks for watching.
Great judges, and we have a shortage. I mean, look at Judge Coleman. He's still in his prime.
In fact, I think after the age of 70, sometimes people bring even greater wisdom to the judiciary.
Having someone mandatorily retire simply because they've reached the age of 70 is just I don't think it reflects current realities.
In thinking about it, I think the age of 70 should stay where it is.
There should be a retirement age because some people just lose it after a period of time.
There comes a time in all of our lives where we should step back, and if sometimes we have to be mandated to do so, we should do that. Not for sheriffs, though, just for judges.
Major funding for due process provided by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law, and by the Fund for New Jersey, supporting informed citizens for an effective democracy.
I mean, do you feel
Thank you, Doe.
as
Yes,
competent?
Chief Justice, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you,
By the way,
Chief and Ray and Sandy.
By the way, what is the drinking age for judges?
111.
Chief Justice, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Okay.